gentlemen, I'll call this meeting to order. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all for coming and hanging out with the board on Friday the 13th. It's a nice day. The purpose of this meeting was a few members of the board wanted to have a little discussion and see where we are with regards to getting to the point where we could set a tax rate, which would be the closing out the fiscal year 2013, which ended June 30th this year. So it's more of an information of where we are, what needs to happen to close, and what our options are if there are any little trip hazards out there. And that's, we're not here, I don't believe we're going to make any real decisions or not, because it's just get information, because we have another meeting with this same subject on Monday. So, that being said, I'd like to start, if none of the board has any objections, with an outside forensic accountant that the town has had here for a couple of years now, is Matt Angel, and I'm going to let him talk on fiscal 13, where we are, what needs to happen, and if there are any bumps.
Okay.
So Matt?
Where do you guys stand here? Do you want me to stand?
Yeah, well, you can sit, stand, you can
Sit or
sit.
stand?
You can sit.
Does it address you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Good evening, I'm Matt Angel. I'm the outside consultant helping out the town reconciling their books. Basically, just a quick synopsis of where we are. Right now, the cash book for 2013 is built. We really need the general ledger up and going to really prove out that cash book. And so far, the general ledger is going for most information, like pretty much everything is entered into the general ledger. And I've reconciled through October. There's a couple of accounts that are difficult to follow, and those we're going to tackle. I'm going to try to tackle them over the weekend, and then hopefully I'll be done with my reconciliation on Monday. All right. Let's kind of get into some of the information that I got from the town accountant earlier today, and I've reviewed it as well. And this has to do with the tax recap. And what he's gone over is, or identified is that the tax levy is short by about $505,000. All right. We're just here. This is just a problem that we just have to fix. And I've come up with like 3 different options that you can do to fix the tax levy. Okay. The first option is to ask the taxpayers for an override. The second one is to reduce your budget. Okay. The third one is wait for free cash to be certified. I'm pretty confident that the town accountant's going to get his reconciliation done pretty quickly, but I think you're pretty much rolling the dice if you're going to be trying to wait on free cash, because you don't even know how much money you're going to have in free cash. You don't know if it's going to cover the $505,000 that you need. Okay, so I think your only 2 good options that you should really consider is asking for an override or cutting your budget. Okay, sooner than later, if that's your choice. All right. That's really all. Do you have any questions?
Yes.
Where did this error come from? Not necessarily because I want to point fingers, but so that this does not happen again. As you know, we just had a $620,000 override this year on the promise of keeping services. I think the chances of getting us getting another override are non-existent, which would mean making cuts to the budget. So what is the source of this, so that we can understand and also the taxpayers can understand what exactly went wrong here?
Oh, you look, okay. I don't think that the important thing is how it happened. It happened. The problem is that the system, let's get right down to it. You guys really should have like a town administrator and a finance director to help guide the process, okay? Without that, especially like a finance director, without having someone walking through the budget process, all right? If you had a finance director, I do this for other towns, and what I do is I will come to the finance committee, here's your budget, this, and everything ties out, all right? So it's my responsibility as a finance director, okay? If you had that kind of person here, we wouldn't be talking about this tonight, okay? So it's really the structure.
Just as a follow-up question, having to cut $500,000 from our budget, I don't know where we would have funds to pay an increased amount to a town administrator or to hire a finance director, particularly one that's qualified.
Okay.
And just to challenge the point, I think that how this happened is extremely important. It's $500,000 of taxpayer money. That is, now I understand it's not that money is missing, it's that there was a budget mistake, but I
Right.
don't trust a system that can make a $500,000 mistake. You know, we're not Boston, we don't have like lots, a lot of extra money to
Agreed.
throw around.
Agreed.
So when a major portion of our budget is, there's an error of this size, I think how it happened is extremely important. I mean, extremely important. One of the most important things.
You don't have that money to begin with to tax, okay? So it's not like it's the taxpayers' money. The Proposition 2.5 just didn't give that authority to you anyways, all right? So really, the whole purpose of this is to live within the means that's prescribed by Prop 2.5.
Right, okay. We had a annual town meeting where we discussed, and actually we've been discussing the budget for the vast part of 7 or 8 months.
Right.
The entire foundation on which all of those discussions took place was completely erroneous. The entire base of that. To say that that is not important, how that happened, like I said, I understand that it's not that there's missing money. To not determine how that happened, I think is irresponsible. I mean, we've literally wasted, there's been arguments and money spent on elections and this and that, and the entire foundation was completely false. People passed an override thinking that they were going to be getting services and retaining services that they now likely will lose. Spending more money for another override election. I think that it's important. So is it your, not testimony, but is it your statement to us here that we don't know how this happened, or you just don't want to discuss it?
I know how it happened, okay? I've already spoken with the appropriate people about it, okay? I think that the effort of this board would be best spent on solutions rather than digging about it in the past, okay? One of the solutions is to have guidance in the budget process, all right? Right now, there is no, you have volunteers helping out the town, and you're a volunteer as well, helping out the town. And let's just move on and come up with solutions rather than making the process difficult for generating volunteers to help out the town.
But we don't know what the problem is what I'm saying. So how do we
Okay.
craft a solution to not have this happen again if we don't know what the problem is? I mean, I don't think
crafting
I'm
the
off base
solution-
here.
Okay, crafting the solution is to have a good budget model. A spreadsheet that shows you what your gross revenues and your gross expenditures are, okay? Right now, you guys are budgeting based upon net numbers. Okay? It's just very difficult to follow how net numbers are, unless you're the person generating those net numbers, then you know what makes up those numbers that have been netted together, okay? So you just need to start working on, this is what your gross revenues are, this is what your gross expenditures are, and then have someone double checking, making sure that there are no errors in the formula.
Would it be,
No, but
No, I mean-
yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, yeah.
would it be safe to say that, and pretty much, I know I see the assessors here, the accountant, Julie, myself were on the board when this happened. we switched from an accountant,
Mhm.
a long-time accountant, at like 10 years, whatever, who had an operating system, an accounting system, and a software system that was unique to him.
Yes.
It was not something that was used in probably like 99% of the rest of the towns and cities in Massachusetts. I think that's a
There's
fair
very few
statement.
towns.
So when he left and that system was in play for another year before it was set, he would not renew it, he would not let Templeton use it anymore or anything. So we not only switched accountants,
Mhm.
we switched to a new accounting software system that was more in line with the majority of the cities and towns.
Mhm.
Now, transcribing numbers, net numbers, or just figures and how things blocks were put in place, we're using one software, which you can make, it does no good to say this, and maybe it was different, maybe questionable, maybe shady, maybe not understandable, maybe a head scratcher for other accountants. Whatever the factor is, the transition from that system to the present was probably not the smoothest. We were for a while without an accountant.
Mhm.
We basically had a secretary filling in and did a fairly good job stepping up and keeping the payroll and the bills getting paid with the help of the former accountant for a while. Then we made the switch to the Vadar system, a new accountant who has to now plug these numbers in from, like, it's like using an old Windows operating system and plugging in stuff to, Mac or whatever. In my simplistic mind, that's how I see it.
Mhm.
And somewhere along the line, either the formulas that were used in the old ones didn't match, or it's left a gray area, plugging numbers in, and without that accountant here and explaining, you're basically figuring out this transition kind of blind.
Yeah.
And gray area, something happened. And it does, in my opinion, no good to just point. We probably end up spending more time and more money trying to figure out and trying to, prove, if you will, or point the blame or the thing at an individual or one thing. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think where you need to start, though, is first build your foundation.
And
Your foundation is your general ledger, making sure that the reports are getting out to the department and to the select board.
for clarity's sakes,
Yeah.
the tax levy, and we're over the tax levy.
Yes.
Quick and dirty explanation for everyone.
Okay.
Tax levy, how 2.5, and being over it, what does that really mean?
Okay. Your tax levy is the amount of money that is authorized, that the state authorizes the town to assess on its taxpayers. The way it's calculated is you take the prior year tax levy, you add 2.5% to that, and then you look at new growth. New growth would be increase in the valuation of property or new construction. And then you add in overrides on top of that, and then that equals your new levy for this year, okay? Unfortunately, your new levy is lower than what you budgeted for.
And why is that? You won't tell us, right? I mean, I just want to get to the crux of it.
The problem is planning, okay? The problem is the model in which the budget was set with, all right? And it's the process. Let's just make it that way. It's the process, it's not the people, all right? Your process is flawed. You started out with a budget model that was very difficult to follow because it wasn't on a gross basis, okay? And I think that there also needs to be someone with their pulse more on what your estimated Prop 2.5 is, or your tax levy is. And the way I would budget is, you take your tax levy from the prior year, add in 2.5, don't even consider new growth, and try to budget within that. If you have new growth, great, then that's available for projects or the like.
So it would be like a extra money surprise,
Right.
rather than
right.
being short.
Is it, there are certain ways that you can make a town healthy. One of them is having excess levy capacity. Here in Templeton, you have no levy capacity. All right. Another way is to have reserves built up in your free cash. You pretty much use your free cash each and every year. So because you use your free cash and you have no levy capacity, your budget has grown beyond the ability to tax within 2.5.
Would that basically be, well, one of the ways we got in this mess is any free cash is like savings, and we just spent it every year, and now we don't have that to fall
Yeah.
back on, and we're spending more than what we could bring in.
Right. There's nothing wrong with returning free cash back to the taxpayers, and you should. However, it should be done with a plan, not with just wholesale return each and every year.
So the process, we'll just put all of that aside. And I think that the not having free cash isn't what caused the problem. I think that's why we don't have a safety net to fall back on. But, so you say changes in the process. So this whole thing can be avoided just by going to a gross?
Yes. So,
Then, well,
so,
if I
okay.
can just quickly, and then you can, I'll let, feel free to obviously expand. Why has that not been recommended to the board? Or at least I have never heard of it, and I've only missed one meeting since I've been here. Why, if this problem is so apparent and so easily corrected, why are we discussing it now
Okay.
after a $500,000 shortfall?
The problem has been created based upon the culture of how the town budgeted over the past couple of years, okay? So you had one person who controlled all the numbers going into that budget. That person has left. Now you have essentially nobody and a group of people trying to figure out how to pull together a budget based upon the same model, okay? And essentially, a lot of other towns don't use that kind of model. So think of it this way. When you look at your budget, do you look at just what's going to impact the tax rate, or do you look at all activity that the town essentially has, okay? Over the past several years, everyone looked at how the budget was set based upon the impact to the taxpayers, ignoring all the other funds like water and sewer and other revolving funds, okay? If you looked at everything in gross, all the funds together and all the revenues broken out, you're not netting revenues against expenditures, then you would essentially not have any errors. I mean, it's simple, but it's just the way the culture has been for the last couple of years.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that? I lost you in the middle of it.
The culture?
What were you just saying?
All right, the way that the town budgets
Right,
is their focus is on just the tax rate,
yeah,
okay? So they only look at what's impacting the taxpayer. There are other activities that the town has that doesn't impact the taxpayer.
right,
You have ratepayers, like water and sewer, okay? And you also have other funds like revolving funds that come into this, that may come into this.
water and sewer enterprise funds, though.
Exactly, okay? So what you have to do is, when you set the tax recap, the
Yeah.
tax recap includes all activity, regardless of what the source is. Even though,
Water's not included on there.
okay, sewer is, but
Right.
sewer's an enterprise fund.
Correct.
Okay, so you have the revenue of the sewer from the ratepayers, and you also have the expenditure from the ratepayers netting each other out on the tax recap, okay? But on the documents used by the town, it didn't include that information. It netted it out. It didn't have the sewer fund in there.
But, yeah, they do. Like the separate schedule,
That's on that recap. That's not on the documents used to create the budget.
because we don't raise taxes to support the sewer department.
Right, but you need to look at every activity that you got,
But that's
not
not,
just what the
that's not
taxation.
where the shortfall is.
Okay, the shortfall is because nobody was looking at the entire entity. The ratepayers and the taxpayers.
The shortfall is not because the sewer department is $500 million.
The shortfall is because the budget is set up. The shortfall is, what you got is you've got some transfers between funds, okay? Some of the money's there, the revenue is there, but the expenditures weren't there. It ends up reducing the tax rate. So you use ratepayer funds to offset those expenditures, to reduce the tax rate.
No.
So just in summation, what I'm taking from that is that the revenue from the sewer department was included when it, as something that we could, when really,
We could.
we couldn't. Either
Right.
expenditures also had to be included, or neither should have been
Okay.
included. And that, right, and that's what the problem is, where we are
That's-
here.
Excuse me,
That's
can
one
we-
of them, but there's
Okay.
another one
Can
just like
Luann
it.
say
Oh,
something
yeah, I'm
about
sorry.
that, because
Yeah,
she
sure.
worked a lot of years for the
Yeah,
sewer
sure.
department.
I know, like, and I've been looking at Fred stuff, and I'm not an accountant, but the town as a whole votes at town meeting to pay Worcester County retirement, prime example. And in that article, sewer, light, and water all need to reimburse the town's general fund
Yes,
to do it.
right,
And I know in fact, I've always reimbursed the town's sewer department's warranted to pay into the general fund.
yeah.
Actually, was that done in 2013? I can honestly say I've talked to the department and they've never been billed to pay 2013's Worcester County. So another flip side, did water and light also not reimburse general fund? Because that's gonna
Well,
bring some
it-
money in, that's big money.
I can answer that. Yes,
Fred?
it was done. The sewer department shouldn't be billed, it's just a transfer between funds. That has been done.
But actually, the transfer hasn't come out of their money.
It will.
Okay, it will, but it hasn't been.
But it really doesn't affect the whole situation. It's gonna happen.
I have a problem. I can't see where you said it doesn't affect the situation when you take, say, $1 million out of the general fund and sewer doesn't reimburse you.
They are going to reimburse us. We will make the entry. 13 has nothing to do with 14. This is the 14 recap.
Well, did they reimburse you for 14? That's what she's asking.
No,
I mean, for
13.
13.
Yes, the light and water did. I will make the transfer on the books. Yes, that does not affect 14.
Movement of cash can move independently of moving funds within side of the general ledger.
But what she's saying is it's in the expenses for 13.
Okay,
In the retirement of
Mhm.
595,275, included in that retirement is not only the town share, but also light, water, and sewer.
agreed. And that information is correct on the recap that the town accountant has generated.
Right.
What's not correct on the budget document that we
Okay.
used.
Is it included in the revenues here?
See,
The
my
money's
problem
coming
is I'm having difficulties in figuring out how the local revenues were generated. The one that you're looking at right there, that 2.2 million, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Local receipts.
Yeah, I've gone
But
through.
does that include the
I've-
money coming in? Did we get the money and was it posted properly?
All right,
Light, water, and sewer?
whether you
That's
get
what
the
she's
money or
asking.
not, that doesn't impact how the tax recap works.
Wouldn't you have it under your revenues if you've got it in
All
your
right,
expenses?
you are confusing budget
Yeah.
versus actual, okay? Because she's not seeing the cash being transferred, doesn't mean it affects the tax rate. And this is a hard concept because there's two journal entries that are going on. There's one is moving cash between funds, and the other one's actually moving fund equity, or essentially free cash between funds.
Do you understand?
I can see what he's saying, but
Yeah,
like I
but
say, I don't do the accountant side.
I know, and that's, I
enterprise
guess,
side.
I guess that's what we're having trouble getting our heads around, is that if you have light and water and sewer, retirement, or stuff in there under expenses, in the actual expenses on the page, whatever page it is, if you have that there, and that's not supposed to be paid out of taxation, it's supposed to be paid for by light and water and sewer, and that money comes in to reimburse it, shouldn't that be in your revenues under
Okay.
or under something?
You should have a revenue
Yeah,
and an expenditure that equal each other.
exactly, that's what I'm asking.
Right, the tax recap is right. The tax recap that the town accountant created is correct.
Okay,
The budget document used to determine what the tax levy was only had the revenue, not the expenditure. Okay? As a result, the tax levy goes down.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yes, Fred?
Every appropriation at town meeting has to go on the recap.
Mhm.
That has to have a funding source,
Right.
and that's what the recap shows. The budget document did not have all of those. That's why we have a problem.
I don't know. You have to ask him. I don't know.
okay, can I ask another question? Sorry. But the budget, it was left out of the revenue on the budget forecast, but also it was left out of the expenses on the budget forecast.
If what you're saying is true, then we wouldn't have a problem.
It is, it's right here, this is the budget
What,
forecast.
what numbers two are you looking at?
The budget forecast, it says retirement, 373,059, that was just the town share.
Correct,
Right.
and that's why we have a problem, because the recap reflects the whole thing.
But
The
you-
budget document did not, that's what we're trying
I
to
know that.
explain. That's why we have a difference.
But also the local receipts were less than the revenue.
Same same thing.
So if it went up there, okay, all right, I'm really confused now. Never mind.
So would it be your recommendation that moving forward, that before the budget goes to annual town meeting, it should be reviewed by,
The town accountant.
right, I was
Yeah.
gonna say professionals, but I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but I just mean people who that's their job to review budget, that's.
Exactly.
Please,
Okay.
please remember that this is the first year that somebody else did the budget.
Mhm.
The former town accountant did it all the time. He did everything, as a matter of fact. This is the first year that's why obviously we have a problem. The budget document is flawed. They use that model. We are where we are.
You used the prior accountant's model, which caused
Which was the gray
confusion.
area and the transfers.
He knew what it was.
Someone else
Somebody else did
Bond
not.
is
had to
Why can't
read
we go after him?
into it.
Why can't you go after him if he was bond and he was doing bond
Excuse
work?
me, Pete, hold on. When,
I guess like you say, this is the first year you're doing the recap that's out of whack.
No, no. I've
Not
done the
you,
reg-
but I know you've done
I didn't
recaps,
prepare
I'm
the-
not,
I didn't
I'm
prepare
not
the
saying you
budget.
didn't. Well, I'm just saying, this year, right now, we're in a shortfall for fiscal 13.
No, fiscal 14.
14.
Tax, okay, the tax recap, but aren't we gonna come next year be in the same situation because of what and how we projected our figures for this year?
There
I
may
mean, we're
be-
gonna be in the
there may
same
be- you may
situation
be.
probably next December, sitting here saying, so even if we go to town meeting floor this year, most likely, next year, we're gonna be going to town meeting again, only because maybe then in fiscal 15 or 16, this is gonna finally be
Which
fixed.
is why Matt said to change the process.
Right, but right now, we're in the middle of this year also, so this year's not gonna work out come recap time
Right,
next year.
we're in the middle of 14.
Right,
That's what
exactly,
this
we're
is
gonna,
for.
yeah, and we're gonna be in the
That's
same
why it has to be
situation
fixed.
again,
If you
yeah.
had free cash,
But
like
we
you
don't.
said, and you were able to close the gap with free cash, you are essentially kicking the can down the road.
Yeah,
Because that's what they did.
Without changing the process.
Right,
Right.
right.
And once we change the process,
We still have to cut.
You
and,
still have to cut.
yeah.
right, but if we had, for like next year, this
For
time.
15, it could be
If we
corrected,
have
yes.
the free cash, it's not gonna fix the problem, but the solution for the funding would be available. So
Yes.
you wouldn't have to go shred the budget or, hey, can you give us some more money? That route.
Yes.
I understand just throwing the free cash without changing the principles, the basis, is not gonna solve the issue, but it wouldn't be such a big deal
Right.
in the middle. It would give you time while you, so instead of taking 2 years, to work through it, it would take a year, because you would have the funds to, you know, to make up the difference without having to do drastic things otherwise.
Now, to get out of this cycle, free cash should be used for projects or reduce the tax rate, and almost never to close a budget gap. And then you won't have a problem.
And he basically said what I was alluding to with the shady gray areas of, because I personally just don't wanna go there and just end up yelling at each other, and holding somebody accountable. How much money, what's the first thing that's gonna happen? Lawyers. How big of that bill is that gonna be, and is it gonna be worth, the end gonna be worth the expense and the cost to you all who are gonna pay the bill? And if we're short, just in our basic whole budget, where are we gonna get that money for the legal? Sometimes it's just, you get slapped, you get kicked, and, you know, okay, don't do that again. It's, don't give the cookie jar to one individual ever again, is the lesson learned. Because the reason the treasurer is supposed to do things, the assessors are supposed to do things, the town clerk is supposed to sign off on things, the tax collector is supposed to do things, and the accountant makes sure, you know, all the money goes to the right places. If you have just one guy plugging in all the things, I think this is the mess we get. And it didn't happen yesterday, it's been happening for a long time. It's just out of the bag now. And I think, I don't, the rest of the board, I just think the thing to do is, we have some individuals that know what they're doing and are trying to fix it, and we should fix it so we don't get screwed again. That's my personal observation, Ken.
And just so I'm clear on this, because we're about halfway through the fiscal year at this point, are we now in a situation where we've overspent? So we'll actually have to cut like 750,000?
We haven't done those numbers yet, but.
Oh, Jesus, so it could be, I mean, I don't know who else is gonna help us. So that's going to be, so we could be looking at not cutting $500,000 because we've overspent. It could be $750,000 that we're cutting from the budget.
I would think there's $500,000 left in the budget. I mean, you might have to cut everything, but no, that's not the case. We have to run the numbers to tell you, see what's left in the budget and go from there.
When will we know what the free cash is gonna be?
We're working on it now. I mean, it's been a
Is that a next week thing, or is that a 6 week thing?
It's been a tedious process
Yeah.
between the old software, the new software, et cetera.
Julie?
Are the budget to actuals that we get now, are they accurate?
14?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
So that's a place to start, I believe. Is there a copy out in the corridor?
No, we don't have one in the corner, but there's probably one on my desk that's recent.
Okay. I know we just got one
Yeah.
as board.
Yeah, but she
last
But just the
week.
bottom line isn't gonna do you any good, because you have salaries, you have everything, you have to
Right.
really look into it, you're not gonna go by a bottom line and then make a decision from there, you know, you have to really look into it. So-
All right, so, my first question, just so we can, I see you. Fiscal 13, closing fiscal 13 now, which we all know in perfect world should have been done 6 months ago.
Correct.
Because there's the books, treasurers, the accounts, it's like a weekly thing of cash book, general ledger stuff should, well, in my mind, that stuff should be done on a regular basis and not be this far behind. I don't want to insult you, Fred, but, so where are we in 13?
All right.
You know, is there a short?
We are in the process of, you have to remember, we're switching software, so there was the conversion of account numbers from one to the other. There was the booking of revenues that weren't in the cash book. There was booking of warrants and payroll warrants, all those things. We're working through all of those things. And cash is the key. You have to reconcile cash, and that's been the most daunting task. So, but we are working on it. Matt's reconciled through October, and I'm getting the stuff entered into the Vadar. We are entering every transaction from the old software system into Vadar. It is a time-consuming process. It's gonna, I
It's
apologize,
time,
but
but it
that's
just
the way
takes
it is.
time.
Yeah.
Okay, dare I ask where we are in 14? Are we up to date on 14?
As far as I'm concerned, everything is fine. You have, Kate Myers has been unbelievable, entering vendor warrants, she's entering revenue. I'm confident that 14 is right on. There are no beginning balances for 14 from special revenue funds because we haven't closed 13. But the general fund should be accurate.
Along with the cash book?
I can't speak to that, that's the treasurer's
Okay.
responsibility.
We haven't reconciled each other yet, but.
We haven't reconciled, right, I don't know what's entered for the cash, but I haven't looked at that part.
Is the cash book for 14
It's reasonably current.
up to date?
I mean, it's not up to today, but it's reasonably current.
For Monday, either you be here or relay it to the selectman's office where we are in 14. Just, are we, a month behind? Because you say generally, are we a month behind, are we 2 months behind, or a week behind, or just so we know where we're at.
For example, we had a payroll this week, and a vendor warrant last week. I believe that goes on not into my cash book.
So, you were, and I understand that you're taking from one system and figuring it out and entering it in to Veda, which not only just doing the transfer, but you're doing it so someone comes along, they can look at it and know
Right,
what it is.
exactly, and I'll tell you another thing, the procedures need to change. We're writing checks between departments, which is foolish when we can make a simple journal entry. We're doing things like that, and waiting for that money to come in as a check. They put on a vendor warrant for, say, sewer, then the check gets given to the town and we deposit it. All we gotta do is move the money on the ledger and physically.
So we're doing.
So those things add to all of this.
So we're doing 6 steps when we could be
Yes.
doing 2 or 3.
Yes, and it adds to the reconciliation of cash. It makes it that much more difficult to reconcile. For instance, the money that's supposed to come from retirement and all these things should be done in lump sums. They shouldn't be done in pieces. They shouldn't have to be billed. It's voted at town meeting, we move the money.
Because they appropriate the
Correct.
funds and.
And I'm not even talking about physically moving the cash, I'm talking about just in the ledger. If I just made a journal entry, bang, it's done. But that's not the way it's done here. So it adds to it.
Would that add clarity, save time?
Absolutely,
yes.
And, I mean, a check, just cutting out those checks is not gonna solve no $100,000.
No, not at all,
But
no.
it is an unnecessary expense.
Well, I'm talking about closing 13. These are all the things that matter. To find 5 or 10 transactions for moving money from light and water to the general fund as a deposit, instead of lump sums when I would know what that is. I don't know what some of this stuff is. So it makes it more difficult. I'll find it, but it takes time.
There's some clear efficiencies that can be made out of all of this. It can cost between $10 and $30 to cut a check. So why cut a check to yourself? Also, there are other things that could be done, like closing out a lot of the bank accounts that we have. I guess we have over 30 bank accounts.
So 28.
And that adds time to the treasurer's side. So we need to consolidate bank accounts, we need to look at how we're processing, so it's more efficient.
And again, the time, trying to do a cash book in this and then keep track of 30 bank accounts, if you just had 1 or 2,
It would be,
you could focus on other things, and instead of having 50 things to do, you would have 10.
exactly.
And clear things up. So we're gonna have fun like another year or so.
Once 13's closed, I think we're gonna be good.
You answered my question. I wanted to know how soon.
Oh, okay. Clairvoyant of me.
So now that we have clearly addressed what the problem was, is, and procedurally how to correct it, we still have the issue of needing to, because the problem will be solved if we cut $500,000, and I know that we don't know what free cash is yet, but you had said earlier that you would not recommend us waiting until, correct?
You don't know when free cash is gonna be.
So you
when
would
it's gonna be
recommend cutting
certified.
500,000,
Or ask for an override.
okay. So you recommend cutting 500?
I will say this, excuse me, I'll say this.
Yeah. So-
From my calculations, there is $250,000 in the general stabilization fund.
Okay.
You could cut $50 from the overlay, $50,000 from the overlay, and that would give you $300,000.
Right, it would, but I guess, but you're saying that we shouldn't wait till free cash is,
No.
Well,
No.
can I speak-
Stabilization's
well,
different from
Can I
free cash.
Right.
mention the overlay? I believe we were tucking that away we've got a reval year coming up in 2000.
See, you shouldn't think that way about taking it
16.
away. This is about
I'm
making the
using
budget
that
work.
overlay line.
And she's
Excuse me,
using
wait,
that.
but see if
Okay.
you,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's excess overlay, so you're budgeting purposely for excess overlay, which is another bad budgeting move. You know, yes, it is a funding source. If you don't use it, you should be voting for, putting the budget in for things that you think you're gonna have ATV cases for, that kind of thing. It's really not a slush fund.
Which I think is some more of the problem, like culturally, of how, the thought process of how we do
Right.
things. And it's kind of hard to change sometimes, things, but in this instance, I think the numbers really speak for themselves of why the efficiencies and things, and I think probably this board should be looking at recommendations. Matt is a consultant, so we are spending additional money, but we need to get the valuable information, not only the work that he's doing, but the information and the ideas that he gets, because he does this for many, it's just isn't Templeton that has these issues, and many other towns, and he has experience and knowledge and good recommendations, and I think we should sit down with him and get those and put them into practice along with the accountant and the treasurer and the collector and the assessor, the deputy assessor and the board of assessors, but so we can all get this system working the way it should with checks and balances. So people that are supposed to enter something have the authority and are doing it, and it's not one individual, so we can get away from the situation that created this mess. And that's pretty much what it is. Did you?
Wait, I just wanted to, I didn't know if Julie still wanted to, I don't know.
No,
I've talked a
okay,
lot.
good.
Okay, so,
I'll wait.
yeah, so I just want to get to what the solution is going to be, since we have a meeting on Monday, so we can have like the weekend to marinate on what our options are and to think about this. So I understand, again, I really kind of want to know if your recommendation is to make those cuts and you think that that is the best thing to do, rather than wait until the free cash figure is certified. I know that we have some money in stabilization as well that we can use, but clearly we're gonna have to make cuts of some kind. Obviously, that takes weeks before we can hold a meeting, and to schedule that all out. And if we're continuing to spend more than we should, every week that we spend or deeper the cuts are gonna have to be, right, regardless of whether it's 100,000 or 600,000. So I think that getting that taken care of sooner rather than later would be a good thing, and also we have to notify people if pink slips are going out, if they're in the union. So is your recommendation that we should not wait to start that process, or?
Okay, you should not wait for free cash, okay?
Okay.
I think your solution's gonna be a combination of cutting, asking for an override, going for other funds like stabilization and possibly overlay, okay?
But I guess my question being, before we can make cuts, we have to know what that amount is. So we either can cut the full amount that we know we're gonna need, or we're gonna guess, right? I mean, because we're not gonna know what free cash is.
The thing is, you may not know what the free cash number is. You know, you may guess it as being 500,000, it might be 100,000.
So then we should cut the full
Don't know.
amount then, because we don't know.
So we
Or
should
use,
decide.
or use, the thing you want to avoid is using one-time funds like stabilization, free cash, because then you have the same problem next year.
Right.
However, now you have a problem, you have to fix it, and rather than laying people off, maybe using the stabilization money is the way to go. But again, it's up to the taxpayers, use a 2/3 vote at town meeting, use that money.
Yeah.
So they could say no, and you'd have to cut 500,000.
The way I look at it, I think our first step is to let Fred and our current financial team close 13. Get that done. That needs to be done. We have the weekend to figure out what we're going to present to people and to figure out when we're going to have a special town meeting, because everything we've discussed right now is going to be predicated on a special town meeting. We have an election in January, we'll probably need another ballot election if we decide to go for an override. So I don't know if there's a world record for special elections in the town of
Well,
Templeton.
until that stuff
We're
is
pretty
done,
well.
you're gonna
Right.
have to borrow.
Right,
So that's another step.
which increase our costs, which.
Your interest,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So I think the first step is to allow, get the books closed for 13, and then meet again. We're gonna meet on Monday.
Anyway.
And we have the weekend to figure it out. If anyone has any ideas, you know, when I said the system was broken, I meant it. I think we've been doing things incorrectly for a number of years, and it's finally hit the crisis point. And, you know, there's all number of factors, and we can sit around and waste time blaming and pointing fingers, but that's not gonna get us to where we need to be. You know, if using stabilization, and I don't agree with that, but, you know, is it better than cutting? What were our options? Getting rid of the night shift on the police department, or public safety, or not plowing? You know, we know what we were gonna cut, to cut 600 and something thousand. We know what those cuts were, and people pulled together and they voted for an override. I thought we were done. I thought we were, you know, in good shape. So this is not how I wanted to spend my Friday night, or probably the next 4 months, trying to figure this out. But we're in a hole because we're halfway through this fiscal year. And so we're gonna have to do something. We're gonna have to make hard choices, whether it's, you know, giving up overlay and, you know, zeroing out stabilization yet again, which is really bad policy. But if that gets you to 300,000, then you're looking at a cut of 200,000, if the voters approve it. Big ifs.
Luann, and then.
I guess my question is, if we haven't closed the books out for fiscal 13, okay, and you're doing the recap sheet based on actual revenues and expenses for fiscal 13, are we really sure that we're gonna be short that much?
No,
I don't understand.
we're gonna be
Don't
short
you need to
for.
The
close out the
actuals
books?
don't really, the actuals are, the DOR uses the actuals, say on local receipts. Only because they don't want you, you know, if the next year you think it's gonna be higher, they have a
You
percentage that
justify
they
it,
use.
yeah.
That's all the actuals for 13 and 4. And we.
Okay, so
the
whether or
best
not
thing to
you're
do
balanced?
The best thing to do with local receipts is to budget what you thought, exactly what you had the prior year, then you're safe. Instead of trying, oh yeah, well, excise is gonna be $50,000 higher, when it may not be.
Right, or you
So-
might not collect it. So,
Correct.
so the book's not being balanced
Has nothing to do with free cash.
to do with it. Okay,
Correct.
that's kind of what
That
I was
has to do
wondering,
with
because I'm
free cash.
thinking maybe if something else was
No.
not in there. Okay.
So then my question is just so I'm clear. So if we are able to pull together the money from free cash stabilization, next year's budget though will have to contain those cuts, correct? Like at some point
Well,
we
you'll
have to.
have your tax levy for next year, and then you build your budget around that. There'll probably be some, there'll probably
Okay,
be some
right.
cuts, absolutely.
But we will have, and kind of a good thing, we will have this mess to look at as far as, you know, not overestimating things and the bottom end to use, and maybe we'd get a good surprise instead of a bad surprise. And I know as a taxpayer, it's probably sounded good over the years, and I've said this a few times, a balanced budget and no tax increases and no layoffs always sounds good, but when you can only go up 2.5%, and if the school budget on itself just asks for a 2% increase, and then retirement insurance and all those other things and fuel and stuff that you can't control goes up more than, you're always behind the 8 ball. It's, I think the taxpayers, you have to ask for a small override at least every other year, just to try to stay even. You know, and I'm not talking, 500, but, 250,000, maybe even 300. It's one of those things. It's just like your household budget. Your oil bill goes up, groceries go, everything goes up, not much goes down for the long term. And nobody likes to pay more, but it's,
But like Matt was saying, with a good budget module,
we
you'll
could
know
keep,
that.
right.
And you'll know
that.
if you need an override, you'll know
And
all those things.
So, like I said, to use Matt and you to get that base model, and so we don't, moving forward, we just don't have one person in charge of the cookie jar, and
Right.
we estimate and stuff like on the lower, instead of always expecting, you know, like your home budget, basing it on, now I'm always gonna have this overtime until the boss says there's no more, and then, you know, where am I getting that extra money?
Exactly.
Same thing. Pete?
So can you get a copy of that guy, the other guy left before all his work, that computer he had?
Well, none of that has anything to do with it.
What do
He
you
just,
mean? What does
well,
that have to do with it?
I'm gonna
Because-
explain. He had a budget document that he used, right? And he didn't tell anybody how to use it, he just left it, and it was used that way. He didn't do anything wrong, he knew what he was doing with it.
He knew,
Well, that's.
he knew.
That's
Yeah.
the thing.
That's what they did down in Boston.
Right, but I mean, there's no legal
Well, you should be,
implication.
out in Phillipston working in other places.
It's like people, some
It should
people
be.
keep a set of books or keep notes or things a certain way, and if you try to go in and find stuff, you don't know how they organize.
Well, I can tell you when I
know.
started, I was confused. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah,
So-
I haven't either.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 16 years at Harvard.
And I think that
Up
kind of
and-
says it all. When,
You know.
you looked at a system and you were scratching your head,
Correct.
and if people that made up the budget used that old model, and it looked like it was this way, when in actuality, things meant other things.
Right.
And it's
I
just,
agree.
part of it's an honest mistake, and it's come to light finally, and better, I guess, now than further on down the road. The sooner it's fixed, do it.
Would it be useful and helpful to get clarification on the water enterprise status?
Actually, the enterprise funds really have nothing to do with the recap. They wash, expense, revenue. Problem was, some of those numbers were used and the revenue were not the expense. It was very confusing, the budget module. That's why it didn't match the recap. Not, the full numbers weren't used. I don't know what the calculations were, but that's why we are where we are.
See, at the end of the day, the budget that's presented at town meeting, you should be able to look at the tax recap and find those numbers exactly, okay?
And that wasn't always the case.
Right now,
Yes.
you can't do that, because you have to expand those numbers that have been netted together.
So we know the problem, we have some options for a solution. And 13, you guys were working hard on getting that done. And 14 is fairly close to being up to date.
Yeah, I think you can be confident in that.
We just have to figure out which way or which combination of things to fund the over expenditures. Because we spent 2,000 and we only had 1,500 in the checking account, so to speak. Well, I'm a simple little guy, Fred.
Hey, no, hey, it's all about finance. You do, like you handle your checkbook.
Dan?
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to restate what I've said before. I know we all feel the immediacy of this problem. It's creating pressure and it's driving us to try to find a solution. Thing is, if we don't do planning, mid to long-term planning, that's the best assurance to prevent this from happening again. If we plan, we know ahead of time that things are going to go wrong before we find ourselves on a Friday night sitting here trying
Well,
to fix this.
and I believe that's what these two gentlemen have said. With how this happened and how to change it and to plan it. And Doug has been talking and speaking on, and this probably demonstrates why it's a good idea for a financial calendar for the year. I know there are timeframes in the town bylaws, budget thing's supposed to be done by, this date.
I'm talking about 3-year plan, 5-year plan.
Right. And it's kind of hard to have, capital, plans for like capital expenses and things when you don't have any funds set aside to do those things. Hard to plan that you don't have any money. So moving ahead, once we get the solution to this, again, take Matt and some other individuals and the ideas and put down a plan along with a yearly plan and a long-term, like 5-year plan, which would be like, you know, what are the projects we would like to do and money we'd have to set aside and this and that, like 5 years down the road. And again, I personally don't think going after anyone or anything, I just think we'll spend more money on attorneys than we would netting from it. And no matter how you feel about, getting somebody or holding somebody responsible, if you're gonna spend $500,000 when you're already short $500,000, just to say what, it's your fault, I don't know, are you gonna get that $500,000 from them? I don't think so. And I think $500,000 on legal bills is probably on the short end. Julie?
I just want to give an example of what the town did as far as the sewer department and not paying a bill from Scott Graves for, I think it was $2,500. They spent $23,000 in legal fees to go to court to prove that they didn't have to pay him.
And I think
That's money spent foolishly.
where we would, I just think that's where we would go if we tried to go, again, finger pointing and yelling.